for continuing to show up. We knew in the beginning that we'd attract a lot of students, but they all would be up to make these workshops. So again, we're videotaping them. They will be up online. And I think, was there a sheet of paper that we handed out that has the YouTube address? So you can actually, if you missed any of the workshops, you can be able to watch them on YouTube. So the good news is we now have 45 applications for this competition, which as we met to figure out how we're going to do this, we are going to have a pitch off on April 12th. So the big event is on April 17th, and we figure we can handle probably 10 pitches that night. And so we're going to block off about 3 hours on Friday late afternoon to have a pitch off, where all 45 teams will have a chance to present their rocket pitch to a panel of judges. And that means we have to find more judges, so we're busy working with alumni. We'll have a good team of judges lined up. We'll probably break you up into rooms, so there'll be maybe 4 rooms, maybe 8, depending on how many teams actually show up, 8 to 10 teams in a room. And you'll have a chance to pitch your idea and then talk to the judges, and we'll use that sort of to narrow it down a bit to the 10 teams that'll end up going to the final pitch 5 days later on the 17th. And we're also looking at some, we have the $25,000, we're also looking at some other incentives that we may be able to layer onto this event to make it interesting to everybody. So, as I said, this is the first time out, so we appreciate your taking a risk with us. And we're putting the pieces in place, so we're hoping this will be a great experience for you all. So tonight, I'm really happy. My good friend and colleague, Professor Val Krajewski, is going to spend a little time talking to you about identifying solutions and developing your solution. And she's going to use kind of a relatively new model that she'll introduce you to for sort of thinking what makes a successful solution. So I appreciate, I was down in Arizona State University last week touring their entrepreneurship and incubator facilities. And this business model map that she's going to show you tonight was all up. I walked into the incubator, this map was up on the wall, and that's what all the young social entrepreneurs were using to think about how do I develop an idea that has legs, something that'll meet the needs of the people I'm working with and also be sustainable. So we're really excited to have you. I'm reading a new book, and I just want to share a quote. I really like this book because in the past when people talked about entrepreneurship, typically they think about the very successful business person, right? They think about Steve Jobs or Bill Gates, great folks. But what we're doing here with you all is a little different, right? We're working with looking at a problem that you care about, solving that problem, doing it in a sustainable way. So there's this whole, this new movement, I think, in entrepreneurship to think about the social value of entrepreneurship. So I just want to read you a little quote because I think it kind of summarizes a lot of what we think about when we think about difference makers in this project. Entrepreneurial leaders. Notice how they say entrepreneurial leaders and not entrepreneurs. You guys are entrepreneurial leaders. You're leaders. You're making a difference by taking this step forward. Entrepreneurial leaders are individuals who, through an understanding of themselves and the context in which they work, act on and shape opportunities that create values for their organizations, for their stakeholders, and for the wider society. Entrepreneurial leaders are driven by their desire to consider how to simultaneously create social, environmental, and economic opportunities. They are also undiscouraged by a lack of resources or by high levels of uncertainty. So I think that describes what you all are doing, right? You're taking a risk. You don't have the money to do this yourselves, right? You're taking a risk to get some funds, to get some resources, to maybe get some mentoring that'll help you to implement and move the solution forward. Some of you are going to develop solutions that have high business value, right? They're going to be self-sustaining companies. Some of you are going to develop organizations that might not have a high monetary business value, but are going to make a difference in the community that you're working with. And we want to see all of you succeed. So keep that in mind. You are entrepreneurial leaders, right? If someone says you're an entrepreneur, say, no, I'm a leader. An entrepreneur is just something that's part of it. And it's going to make you successful. So I'm going to hand it over to my good friend, and I'm going to sit back and take some notes and look forward to working with you all.
So far, what have you been doing so far? You've defined the problem. You've got a problem statement in one way or another. Who's affected by the problem? We started to look at that. How are they affected? Why is it important to solve this? So we're going to try to put that in a context for you tonight. And we're going to move this to a context, Steve talked about it briefly, of what we call a business model. And we're using that term business loosely to mean an organizational model. So if you're going to sustain anything over time, it's going to take a community to do it. You've got to be part of that community, and you've got to look at how it all fits together over time. And so we call that a business model, and we'll look at that this evening and put these things in a context for you. We want to see who else is addressing the problem, how it's currently being delivered, and we'll talk about a context for that as well. Give you some clues on how to handle that. So we want to discuss value, customer value, patients, clients, customers, regardless of who we're talking about. You can generalize what we're doing here to any of those groups, whether it's a for-profit corporation that you're putting together, it's a nonprofit you're putting together. If you call your people you're serving a customer, or you call them a client, there's still somebody you got to listen to. And so that's what we want to focus on. And we want to say, how are you going to operationalize this solution? What do we mean by the term operationalize? We want to see how you're going to move your feet. Don't ever watch people's mouths lie, watch their feet. We watch how people move. So what part of the problem are you trying to solve that people have? What kind of value delivered to this affected group? What are the costs and revenues associated with your solution? You'll have to start getting at some idea of that. And how will you sustain this over time? One of the things that the Difference Makers is specifically looking at is we don't want to think about a project as, gee, let's all go down the street, pick up the trash with a stick with a sharp point, and then we're done. That's not going to sustain anything, is it? We need to change the culture, change everything so people don't toss stuff. And that's what we're looking at, is longer-term solutions, and those longer-term solutions fit sustainable organizations. So I think when the judging is going to be taking place on all of this, one of the things we will look for is the sustainability of what you're doing over time. One of the things that always occurs in social efforts is people get burned out. And they get burned out by not having enough salary, not having enough time, not having enough anything. And when people get burned out, whatever they're trying to achieve dies. And so what we're looking for you to put together is a way to put things together that aren't going to burn you out, but instead give you energy. Say, hey, I can spend some of my part of my life doing this in a way that's good for me, good for my family, good for society simultaneously. So that's what we start looking for as we look at your projects. So in a sense, it takes a community. You got to build a sustainable organization. And what we're going to talk about tonight is some of this pieces of this organization that you have to look at. So what's a business model? It describes the rationale how an organization, not you, Mary, not you, John, whatever, how an organization creates value. And you're going to be needing to build a group of people around you over time that all of you together create, deliver, and capture value. So that's what we're looking to do. I'm going to pass out, if you guys will simply take one and pass them on down the side of the table. What I'm passing out is what's called the business model canvas. And you'll see a slide of this coming up in a few minutes that you can download yourself from the presentation at any point. And you also have, I believe, no, you don't have the source on the bottom. I should have put it there. But I stole this. Everybody else is stealing it. We just have to give attribution according to the author. This is commonware. And just know that it comes from www.businessmodelgeneration.com. That's all you need to know. And we have a right to use it based on that. So what I'm going to do here is take you to the movies, and you'll see how this business model starts playing out. And this is coming from Stanford, show you how the pieces come together. And what he's going to use as an example is a Nespresso espresso machine. It's one of these coffee machines that you put the little packets or cups in, and it makes espresso for you of various flavors and so on. And he can show you in this video how the various blocks get filled in and how they used to do it compared to how they do it now. And so you get the sense that a business model is something that may change over time. People can try something one way and organize one way. It may not work. You may have to pivot and do something a different way. And that's okay, because what you're involved in at this point is you're learning. You learn by going out there, interacting with potential clients, interacting with the community, interacting with partners. Everybody is feeding you new information. And the beauty of this is you don't have to write a 50-page business plan all over again. You don't have to throw it out. All you need to do is put a stickum up here. Little yellow stickum and your business model has changed. That's pretty easy, isn't it? So what we want to do is have lots of yellow stickums with really your hypothesis of how all this comes together. Because right now, this whole thing is a guess for you. You're guessing it's going to work. But as you find out more information, you may find out this works well, this doesn't work well, we need to change it. And it's easy to change if all you're putting is a little yellow stickum up and you got a new way of looking at it. Change a few of those and you got a whole new business model. So let's take a look at the Nespresso model at this point. So here you have the business model in front of you. Notice what we have here. We have the clients or the customers. We have a value proposition. I will be focusing on these for the rest of this afternoon. But what you want to notice about the right side, this whole part is dealing with your customer, the market, how you get to that customer, how you deal with that customer, your relationship, whether it's transactional or whether you have a long-term interaction kind of relationship, because those are the two types you can have. And all of that will result in your revenues coming in. What happens on the left side, depending on what you're trying to deliver to the customer, you're going to have certain activities that you engage in yourself. There's cost associated with those activities, whether it's making something, whether it's simply getting people together to give a service, all of those things. You have key resources. What access do you have to dollars? It has access to machines or other things that you need to do your job. And you can't necessarily do it all together, but you may have key partners that supply some of the solution that you're giving here and when you give your solution out. All of that's going to cost you something. And so this side looks at revenue, this side looks at costs, and this better be at least equal, if not bigger, if you want to sustain what you're doing. Does that make sense? So you've got all that in front of you. So what we're going to start expecting you to do here is start thinking about how do you start filling this thing in. I want to show you how some other people have done this. I'm going to start just saying what we're going to focus on again, customer segments, who your customers are, and the value proposition. That's going to be our emphasis. So let's take a look at this in a not-for-profit model. Notice on the customer groups, how many of you are running nonprofit kinds of things? You really have, in this case, my example here, you have two customers, don't you? One customer is the recipient of the service. The other customer is the donor who's going to give you funds. Somebody who's interested in the work that you're doing and is going to help support it in some fashion. A sugar daddy.
Is that me?
Is that who?
Could a mistake in a business model be assuming a donor is a key resource?
A donor is a what?
I mean, if you didn't understand your business model, shall we say, and if you didn't think of your donor as a customer, but rather put them as a key resource, and that might be sort of the backward way.
That you could put it as a key resource, but it would be the wrong way to look at it. Another way to put this in terms of thinking about who people are, it's very important. Think about the .com game some 10 years ago when all the high-tech companies were looking at raising money, and they thought their customer was a venture capital firm who was giving them money. They never raised any money through sales to a real customer, but as long as they had VC money coming in, they thought they were golden. They kept spending it and never found a customer. So those are the kinds of things. You need to think about who your customers are and how they break out. I give this assignment to my undergrads to write a business model. So someone says, well, I'm going to do a grocery store, neighborhood grocery store. Who are my customers? All my neighbors. Well, maybe yes, maybe no. Are there different groups of neighbors in your neighborhood?
Yes. Is your grocery store kosher? Is it halal? Is it organic? Is it vegan? Is it a meat market with nicely butchered meat? Is it just as cheap as you can possibly make it? You get a different group of people going to each one of those.
Absolutely.
Frequencies.
You got it. And so you could deal with that because you're going to, depending if it's vegan, you're then going to give a different service out, aren't you?
Yep.
And so what you focus on, you have to be very specific about who your customer is and what it is that you're providing them. Okay. So what we end up doing here, just to complete this model, we've got 2 customer segments, and what we're providing as a value to the donor, that's the success of the mission, is what their reward is. That's what they're paying for, right? So that's their value, what they get out of it, and the recipient of your service is getting this particular service or product that you're providing to them. In one case, it's free as a price for one group. For the other group, it's a donation. Let's put this into a business context that some of you are somewhat familiar with. I don't know how many of you know Derek Coleman. He did this for my class in strategy, because that's one of our assignments for all the students. And so I took Derek's here. I asked him if I could use it today, and he said, yeah, you can use it.
I saw Derek pitch for the Accelerator. Derek's pitching for $25,000 in a separate event. And did you see his pitch to him the other night? It's come a long way. It's come a long way.
And what I've done is try to block out the rest of this. You can read it, but it's not important. But look at what he has for customer segments. College students who don't have a ride, freshmen, socially responsible students who may not want to drink and drive, whatever. And so his value proposition, atmosphere on the bus, a reputation for getting there safely, a customer experience of what you would experience being on the bus is part of what you get for it, and safe, cheap, convenient transportation to events. Does that make sense, what we mean by a value proposition in that context? And it would be slightly different for each of those groups. And then he's got a revenue stream. His resources and all of that are all sitting here. I didn't want to talk about that today, but you can see how the whole thing sort of fits together to say, this is what I'm doing. And it's all on one page. That's the beauty of it. So you can change anything you want, anytime you want. So why don't you guys take a minute here? Put you to work instead of just staring at me. There's a camera staring at me again. I have to work overtime. If I come in close, I have to make him work. So take your business model, and let's just go to the customer segment portion of it. Why don't you start writing down specifically, who are those groups of customers that your project is going to focus on? Who do you think is going to get your service? Talk about this value proposition. And again, I'm going to take you to the movies. So what you have in front of you is a picture of that he just described. Start thinking about the jobs to be done that your customer wants done for them. And that's really, really important to think about that. And you think about the gains and the pains that they're experiencing because you're trying to get rid of the pain. If people have pain, then they want your service. If they don't have pain, they may not be motivated because people always want to get rid of pain, don't they? You got a toothache, you got to get rid of it. Hey, if it isn't sunny today, you would like sun, you may not do anything about it, you put up with it. But people get rid of pain. Now, I want you to get a different way of looking at this. And again, everything is on YouTube these days. Think about why are they buying you? Why would someone come to you and take your service? What is the problem the job they're trying to get done, the problem they're trying to get solved, the pain they're trying to take away? Those are the issues. If you pin that down, you start understanding what all of this stuff is about. That's your job, is to figure out what job it is that they want to get done. That's why they have a relationship with you. Is that making sense? And the other thing that he brought up in here, I don't have a slide on it, but it's really saying, what are they going to do instead? The word instead is very powerful. Just to give you a story to remember that by. Some years ago, I had a very large sailboat kept up in Maine, and some of the other people up there had a boat similar to mine, and we used to go off cruising the waters of Maine together at various harbors and stuff. And their boat was named Instead. So I asked them, why did you name your boat Instead? Well, they named their boat Instead because they bought the boat instead of a house. So that was the next best substitute for them, right? So what's the next best substitute in terms of hiring you or hiring what else? What's the closest substitute to get the job done that they would go to instead of you? Because we really have to, at some point, the Canvas doesn't introduce it, but you have to think of what are people's options out there. They can go to you, they can do it themselves, or they can go someplace else. And you really have to understand what those other options are and why they're falling short. So this is where we focus on this business model and the two parts of the business model. You can't get the rest of it right unless you get these two parts correct. Get this right, you can move on to the rest. But think about this. This is the most important piece of any business. Understanding your customer. And then you can put this into a slightly different context here. What does your customer find too costly, the way they're doing things now? Too much effort, too much time. What makes your customer feel bad? So we're trying to get into the feelings that the customer have. What annoys them? What frustrates them? Those are pains, aren't they? What else who else is trying to do something here, but they lack certain features, they lack certain performance, it malfunctions, there's not enough accuracy. What else is going on that frustrates that customer? Not fast enough. How about social consequences? Remember, we're all social animals. Whatever you're doing fits into a social context. They have friends, they have families. What does the current solution do? Does it give them loss of faith? They come to get some social services and people make them feel like crap because, gee, get on your knees and beg and I'll give you some services. Or is there a better way to deal with people and treat people? Where's the trust? Where is the power and status kinds of needs? How are all those things being met in your solution? So if you only think of providing a service, but don't think about the feelings of the person, how they experience you, the experience is becoming more and more important in everything that we do in terms of developing solutions for people. They have to experience you in a way that they trust you, they feel good about you. As a matter of fact, we talked about brand earlier. What is brand? Isn't brand an experience of you? Think about yourself opening up a candy bar. I had M&M Mars as my client for a number of years, more than a decade. Every time somebody went and opened up a Snickers bar, how many of you eat Snickers? Sometimes. Most everybody, good. But when you went and opened up that Snicker bar, did you have to have it tested for poison before you opened it? You trusted it, didn't you? You trusted when you tore that paper off, you knew what the taste was going to be, because for a consumer company like Mars, they want consistency in that taste every single time. And that builds trust so that when you tear off that bar and take that first bite, you know exactly what to expect, and that bar meets your expectations every time. And you trust that bar, whereas if somebody else had Joe Schmo's candy bar, you'd be a little bit more cautious opening it, wouldn't you? So trust here is very, very critical, and that has to be built into what you do. And brand really becomes not what you want somebody to believe, it's what people experience time and again and come to believe you are. That's what brand is about. A little bit different than some people would have you believe. So, what's keeping your customers awake at night? Big issues, concerns, worries, what can't they get done? What common mistakes does your customer make? If they're constantly making certain kinds of mistakes, can your product fix those mistakes on a regular basis, prevent them from occurring? What's keeping your customers from adopting certain solutions? Can't learn how to use the product easily enough. Get certain software packages, it takes forever to learn how to use it. What do? You throw it out, you don't bother using the app, right? So if you're going to create an app, it's got to be second nature to figure out how to use it. Upfront investment. One of my colleagues was working for now a very major corporation selling the ovens that made silicone that goes into solar panels. Well, the customers of that couldn't afford it. What did they do? They ended up leasing it and having their own leasing so that the customers could afford their products. So there's ways around just about everything if you can find a way and understand what the problem is that you have with the customer. So how are you going to do this? Well, here's an exercise that you guys can start doing. It's called creating a customer scenario. And think about a single individual customer that you might have. One single person who might buy your service. Do it one at a time. How is your customer currently dealing with this task, this problem, the job they want done? What are they trying to accomplish? What do they wish they could do? How are they approaching this problem? Trying to do it this way or that way? What's interfering with them getting the job done right now? What are the consequences of them not getting that job done properly? It's the consequences and the implications of that that'll put the dollar of value on all of this eventually. That's another 3 hours if you want to do pricing with me. You have to sign up, put your quarter in, and we'll do that as a separate workshop. But aren't you then looking at an individual customer, and then you take another customer, and then another customer? It's going to require you to talk to your customers or your potential customers, isn't it? You can't go into the library and do this stuff. Get out of the library into the field. You go in and talk to customers, and you talk to customers before you spend all your money developing your software and writing code. Code's irrelevant if the customer doesn't like it. You just wasted all that time. So, you got to do this, and you got to keep doing it. Talk to 10, 20 people. And what will start happening is you're going to start seeing patterns here. And it's those patterns that you then go from the individual up to saying, this group wants this. These 4 or 5 people form a group and want that. You had a question?
What if you have half your code done already?
I'm sorry,
What if you have half of your code written already?
Stop. I can tell you an example of a local company who developed an entire set of code for a new sales management software product. I started talking to him. He brought his product into our graduate class, and we did a strategic analysis of it. It was right when the web was being developed, and everything for sales software was going on the web and being web-enabled. His stuff was not web-enabled. He had to stop it instantly. He was building a product that was obsolete because he wasn't on top of what was going on in the market. And so all he could do was waste more money going the way he was going, and he had to turn around and redesign the product right there. Now, you've got some core code that's probably okay, but you really need to know what is it that's most important to your customer. And you can't do that without talking to customers. Another example of that came right out of our labs here at the university. It's about 25, 26 years ago, 25, 24, something in that. I was around here in my early days here. That there's a fellow by the name of Rich Miner working in the Center for Productivity Enhancement. Rich Miner was working with a fellow by the name of John Warner, and they were doing the first software to do image editing on computers. And one of the really smart guys who worked here, faculty member in computer science, who's now since passed, Pat Krolak, kept insisting that these guys go to trade shows. So they took what they had, went to a trade show. At a trade show, they let all the people from all the companies around look at what they had. And the response by everybody coming to their booth was, boy, this is the greatest, neatest stuff in the world that you got. But does it do this? Does it do this? It didn't do any of the basics. It had all the leading edge stuff, but it couldn't add and subtract, basically. You know, and so they went back and realized they were doing all the fancy stuff in the code. They didn't have to throw that out, but they couldn't sell it until it did the basic job that everybody required. And so until they learned that, they went then, once they did that, they went out and started a company called Avid. And any of you familiar with Avid? It started here at the university. And Rich Miner is now head of Google, Google Ventures, I believe. And this is where Rich is. So, yes, you had a question.
You answered my question.
I answered your question. Good. So this is where you got to start finding out from your customer what is going on. What you're looking at is what's the day in their life before you come along. Then what you want to do is go to the other side and say, aha, I'm here. How did I change your life? What's our new approach? What are we enabling that you couldn't do before? What are the economic rewards that you're experiencing, or the social rewards, whatever it is that you're trying to achieve? And is what we charge, and can we do it in a way that we can sustain this over time, make money on it if it's a business, or simply pay our way if we're a nonprofit? Isn't that what you're trying to do? But start with individual customers, clients, who you're trying to service. You must talk to them. And what you're doing, the reason you're taking this business model template and simply putting little sticky, yellow stickies on it, or blue stickies, or green stickies, it's very easy to change what you're doing. When you get new information, doesn't fit what you believed before, and you need to, what we call pivot. Hey, pivots are cheap on here. You simply pick up little yellow sticky and write a new yellow sticky. And if that yellow sticky is inconsistent with what you have on a sticky in some other portion of it, pick that one up and change it, right? That's your business plan. It doesn't have to be 50 pages. It's a page or two that's laying out how you're going to approach this, and approach it as a complete organizational solution over time. Yes, sir.
How does this get folded into the pitch eventually?
Well, what you're doing eventually in the pitch is you're saying, who am I serving? What value am I bringing to them? How am I going to sustain this? Isn't that a major portion of your pitch?
Mm-hmm.
This is
Meaning that because I'm not a business person, but if I'm a business person and I'm listening to a pitch, am I kind of mentally seeing something like this in my head?
Yeah, you're talking about who am I serving, right? Who am I trying to provide benefits to? What is the benefit that I'm providing them? What job do they want done? How am I going to satisfy them? That's the core of your pitch. What resources do I need? That's on the left side, right? I need certain
So
partners.
it's just not a good idea.
It's got to go beyond that and say, how are you going to make an organization out of this so that you can sustain it as a group of people? How can I find other people who want to work with me on this? How do I find outside advisors who want to play in my space? How do I find people out there who are already in that space who would love to work with me in some other way? So we're looking for all of that as you put this together. Boy, that was a nice softball. Thank you.
I try it every once in a while.
Did a good job.
But I'm always saying, I always have ideas, but I never think. I'm an engineer, so I don't think this way. And it's really interesting to say I can have a good idea, but then you take it to a business person, and they always have, and what about this? And I'm like, no, not what about this. I have a really good idea. And they're like, yeah, but.
Good idea means nothing if you can't sell it.
Or someone will buy it. Someone wants it. So we need to move this beyond just an idea. So it's an idea pitch, but the idea pitch is asking you to find out how you're going to sustain that idea and that solution over time. And that's going to take an organization and start moving towards an organization to do so. And I'm just flabbergasted by the ideas that we have around the table here, and the creativity that exists. It's just wonderful to see. Absolutely wonderful. So how are you going to test this? Well, we're looking at all this stuff, how many customers like this, what kind of services they need. It's sort of the start of your marketing plan, if you will. So let's give you an example of how someone did this at a Lean Startup contest. See if I can get this up on YouTube. YouTube is so great, I can stop teaching and just sort of coordinate nowadays. So you need to find people to talk to. It's now 6:30, so I think I'm going to end the talk here. I'm going to just run through a couple things to show you There's some other stuff in the presentation here, revenue streams, solutions, and all the rest of that is in the back of the presentation as sort of an appendix, if you will. So you can look at the entire business model and have some idea what's there. But this is what I wanted to accomplish today. Look at the customer, look at the value proposition, look at the pain, and get yourself out of the library, into the field, onto the subway station, out to the bus stop, wherever you have to go, talk to your customers or your potential customers. That's the message for tonight. Thank you.